everybody, today we are making pad see ew, also known as drunken noodles. And this is a recipe that came across my social media feed and it sounded good, and it's typically made with broccoli, but traditionally it's made with Chinese broccoli, which I happen to have grown this year. And so I thought it would be a good recipe to try that on. I've never made this before. This is a new recipe to me. And it's called Drunken Noodles, not because it has any alcohol in it, but because it's a popular late night street food. And so, you know, when you've had a little too much to drink and you want to sober up before you go home, you have a big bowl of noodles and wake up. So that's why the name. So yeah, another noodle dish. We're going to start out by making the sauce. This sauce starts out with a clove of garlic, and I'm going to once again use my rasp grater to just mince that up. It's a pretty good sized clove of garlic. It's going to be a good hit of garlic. Okay. I always like to rinse my rasp grater immediately, just because getting dried stuff out of this is a nightmare, and it just takes about 10 seconds to rinse it off. So I like to rinse it just as I use it. All right, so clove of garlic. And then I need 2 tablespoons of oyster sauce. This is just a random brand of oyster sauce from the Asian aisle of my grocery store. It does actually contain oysters. So it's got that kind of umami, fishy thing. It's used in a lot of different Asian recipes. It gives a really lovely flavor. So 2 tablespoons of that. And this recipe is from Serious Eats, but I've seen it in a variety of places. And they all vary a little bit, so I'm following this one, but there's lots of different variations out there. I'm gonna rinse that just so it's not a mess. All right, 2 teaspoons of light soy sauce. And light soy sauce is just, I can't remember, I've looked it up. I know kikkoman, which is the common soy sauce, is a dark soy sauce. I just happen to have this because I visited an Asian grocery store and I'd seen it in a couple of recipes, so I bought a bottle. I'm sure you could substitute dark soy sauce and it would be totally fine. So don't feel like you can't make this if you don't have a light soy sauce. And then 2 teaspoons of sugar. This is my favorite way to measure out small amounts of sugar. We don't actually use this for coffee, but it's very handy for measuring just a little bit of sugar when you need it. All right, I think that is, rice vinegar. 2 teaspoons of rice vinegar. I love rice vinegar. It's slightly less acidic than regular vinegar, so it's 4% acid instead of 5% acid. Make sure when you're buying it that you get the unseasoned variety, because you can also buy it seasoned. But I think it's really great for any kind of an Asian dish where you want a little bit of acidity. I really like pickling Asian cucumbers in it. So rice vinegar is one of my 5 vinegars that are always in my pantry. The others are just plain white cider or white vinegar, cider vinegar, balsamic vinegar. What's the last one? I can't think of it right now. Oh, red wine vinegar would be the last one. So those are kind of my 5 essential pantry vinegar staples. So we're just going to give this a toss or a stir. This is going to go on at the end. So that's ready to go. The noodles for this, normally you would use like a pad thai noodle or a rice stick, so they're a little bit wider. I didn't have enough. I thought I had a whole nother bag of these and I didn't. And so I'm actually doing a mix. So the other noodles in here are this vermicelli noodle. They're both rice noodles. These are just thinner. And to get them ready to go into a stir fry, you actually just soak them in hot water. So rather than boiling them, you're soaking them. And so this is just sitting in hot water, and you soak them for a half hour, 45 minutes or so. And so this has been sitting for probably 15 minutes, maybe 20. But yeah, so this is what you typically would use in this dish, but I didn't have enough. Any rice noodle will do. All right, we need 1.5 cups of our broccoli. And I don't really need to measure this, but I'm curious what that measures out to, so I'm gonna see how much I've got here. This was harvest number 1 on the Chinese broccoli. This was harvest number 2, which I suspect is just gonna go back into the fridge. I'm gonna give this a quick rinse. They look pretty darn clean. So I've never grown Chinese broccoli. I've tried other kinds of small broccoli, and I inevitably wait too long to pick it, and it's tough. So this is my first time with this particular type of broccoli. I'll put a note up on the screen as to where I got the seed for it. They're a little bit bigger. You know, what I'm always wanting is broccolini, which is what you get at the grocery store, and that's actually a patented variety of broccoli cross that you cannot get seed for. And so there's varieties that are like it, but you can't actually get broccolini seeds. Maybe that's changed. I haven't checked on that in a long time. I'm sure it was, the last time I looked was probably 20 years ago and it was patented. But this looked like a good version of that. And so I thought I'd grow it this year. It grows really fast. I don't think I'm gonna get a ton of harvest. I'll probably get some side shoots off of this. My plan was to grow it and then pull it out. So I was not expecting it to last a long time. I expected it to be kind of an early spring dish, and that was the end of it. Everything's edible. Big leaves I'm gonna toss, but small leaves I'll just leave in. It's very pretty. I always have the hardest time when I'm growing regular broccoli deciding when to pick it, because I always want to maximize the size, and there is a point where it starts to open up and it's not as perfect as you wanted it to be. And if I have extra, I might just do 2 cups in this, because again, more vegetables is not a bad thing. And I may have waited just a little bit too long on these. You can see they're starting to open up a little bit, but I'm also not familiar with growing it. So I don't know if that's normal, or because I don't remember them being a lot tighter than what they're looking like right now. Yeah, this is probably about 2 cups, and that's fine. I'm expecting this to cook really fast. That's very nice and sweet. Doesn't have a really strong flavor. Sometimes broccoli, if it's been exposed to a lot of heat, can start getting pretty hot, almost like radish-like, because it is in the mustard family. But this is nice and sweet. We've had a ton of rain this spring, unseasonably wet and cool. We're about 2 weeks behind where we normally are in terms of planting and climate, because it's been so wet and cold. But that kind of weather is really spectacular for greens and for broccoli and brassicas. Brassica is just the common family name for broccoli, cauliflower, kale, kohlrabi, cabbage. Those are all brassica family, which is a type of mustard. Yeah, that's about 2 cups, but that's all right. Well, a little extra is not going to hurt anything. All right. Once again, I have thrown everything into my sink instead of directly into the compost bucket because I like to make extra work for myself. My husband grew up on a farm, kind of a homestead, and they used to call the compost bucket the chicken bucket because they would throw the scraps to the chickens. And so we often call that our chicken bucket instead of our compost bucket. I'm just going to stash this in the fridge, and we'll have this a different night. Or maybe I'll make a really lovely broccoli salad with that and post a video about it. Okay. This also calls for, at the end, you, kind of like with fried rice, you stir in a couple of eggs. And so I'm just going to get these ready. These are actually turkey eggs. Our turkeys are laying eggs like crazy right now. And so I'm just going to use these turkey eggs because I have them. Regular chicken eggs is what it calls for, and that's totally fine. Turkey eggs have a super hard shell, and so they're actually surprisingly hard to crack because the shell tends to shatter no matter what you do. I know you're not supposed to crack eggs on a corner like I just did, but I thought maybe it would help. And so the trick is to get them out of there without having a million tiny shells go everywhere. But they are rich and yummy, and I can't eat duck eggs. I'm allergic to duck eggs, but I can eat turkey eggs for sure. The yolks on them are so firm that it's actually kind of hard to beat them up. So this calls for 4 ounces of chicken. That's not a lot of chicken. That's actually normally just a 1 serving. So not a lot of meat in this dish. And you could use tofu or anything else. In my case, instead of using a chicken breast, which is what it calls for, or boneless chicken, which is what it calls for, we butchered 23 meat birds yesterday. And so these are the gizzards of the meat birds. And so because I had them and I thought it would be a nice chewy texture, I'm marinating gizzards instead of regular chicken. Chicken thigh or chicken breast. So this is 4 ounces of chicken gizzards sliced up, and it's mixed with 2 teaspoons of soy sauce and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. The baking soda is doing something called velveting, which actually tenderizes the meat. And that's actually kind of handy for this because these gizzards are going to be a bit chewy anyway. So that's where the other 2 teaspoons of soy sauce went. All right. So now I've got my eggs whipped. Oh, one last thing. This calls for 2 tablespoons of sweet dark soy sauce. That's definitely a specialty item, and it's not something I have on hand. Googling, trying to find substitutes. Basically, it's a sweeter soy sauce, of course, and then some of the recipes I found called for adding different spices to it to flavor it. It's an Indonesian, typically, sauce. And so what I'm going to do is do a couple tablespoons of soy sauce and then a little bit of brown sugar because it's normally made with palm sugar, and which has some molasses flavor in it. And then I'm going to put just a pinch of 5-spice powder in it to give it that little bit of other herby bit that might have been in there. I am making that up as I go along. I'm not a huge 5-spice person, so I'm going to go very light on that. 5-spice is what it sounds like. It's 5 spices. And let me see if I can remember because I actually make it to sell. It's cinnamon, fennel, star anise, Szechuan peppercorns, and something else that I'm completely forgetting. Maybe ginger. I will put it up on the screen. There's lots of recipes out there for making your own. For years and years, you could not get Szechuan peppercorns in the United States. There was a ban on the import of them. It had something to do with a disease concern. I can't remember what it was. And so it's only really been in the last 10 years or so that you could import Szechuan peppercorns. Szechuan peppercorns are a really unique spice that has a numbing effect. So it kind of tingles and numbs your tongue a little bit. Very unique. We actually traveled to China many years ago, and we had a lot of Szechuan peppercorn when we were there. It seemed to be served with just about every dish we had. But now you can get them in the US, and so my 5-spice does have it in there. All right, I'm gonna just do a teaspoon of brown sugar in this. Since it's supposed to be sweet and dark. And as I said, just a tiny pinch, like 1/8 of a teaspoon of 5-spice. It does smell amazing. The fennel that's in this is from my own garden. All of my spice mixes that I sell contain something, if not everything, from the farm. So I don't sell them unless I can have something from the farm in there, which is kind of fun. Fennel can get really invasive depending on the climate. The last time I was in California, I was noticing something that looked kind of fennel-like along the sides of the road, and I went over, and sure enough, it was fennel. It's actually gotten away from cultivation and is kind of a pain in the butt in California because it's such a mild climate, and so it reseeds everywhere. So there's wild fennel just growing on the sides of the roads. There are a lot of lookalikes in that plant family, including some things that are quite poisonous, so you definitely want to know for sure that that's what you're eating before you go pick a bunch of wild fennel on the side of the road and decide to eat it. Yeah, be careful that you know for sure exactly what you're getting. All right, so that's our finishing sauce right there. So this recipe calls for actually boiling, kind of blanching the meat instead of stir frying it. I'm going to try it just to see what we get. And so this is boiling water. And the directions are place the marinated chicken in a large strainer and dip into the water. Cook until the chicken looks white. When done, set the chicken aside in a large bowl. So rather than hold a strainer over here while it's cooking, I'm just going to throw it in, and then I'll fish it out with a spider. Spider is the kind of strainer I'm going to use to fish it out. And I think the whole idea here is that you want really tender little bits of meat. You're not trying to get browning and caramelization. So it's a different approach than what you normally see in a stir fry. I have several spiders. One of them is much more traditional looking, but the last time I was at an Asian grocery over in Seattle, I saw this one. And I have used this so much because it's a really fine mesh strainer. It's really good for skimming foam off the top of broths. And so it's turned out to be one of the more useful kitchen tools I've bought in a long time. These are not going to take very long to cook. So I'm just going to, basically I'm going to let that come back up to the boil, and then I'm going to pull it out, because I don't think it needs much. And it's going to get further cooked in the final dish. So we'll give this a minute. Meanwhile, we can season our wok a bit. And I'm just gonna first do that trick where you put a little bit of oil in the bottom and just wipe down the whole wok. And it's kind of like putting a quick non-stick coating on the whole thing. I'm using peanut oil again. You want a high heat oil. Other than that, it doesn't really matter. as long as it's something that you like the flavor of. I like peanut for Asian meals, but you could also use grapeseed oil is another good one. All right, I'm going to turn the fan on, excuse the noise. And this is... Because these are so tiny, I can't imagine they need more than a minute or two. And again, we're gonna cook these further when we add it back into the dish, so I think that's that. Yeah. Chewy, but tasty. So now we're just stir frying broccoli. I'm gonna add a good amount of oil. Give that a quick swirl. Don't get it on yourself. And I really just want to stir fry this until everything is green and kind of tender crisp. So probably not more than 2 or 3 minutes. Oh, smells like broccoli. I have a whole blog post on how to grow broccoli. I'm always surprised that more people don't grow it. It took me a while to get it figured out where I got the timing right for my area. But if you do it right, regular broccoli, you can get a great big head off of it initially, and then you get like a bunch of side shoots. And so it is actually a surprisingly productive garden plant. It's not something you just pick and it's done like a cabbage. If you buy the right kind, the right varieties, and get it going at the right time of year. So I grow a lot of broccoli. I like it a lot. And then we freeze a bunch. We eat it fresh, but we also freeze it, and it's very nice to just throw into a stir fry in the wintertime. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I think what I'm gonna do here, I like to add just a touch of water because it steams it. And that little bit of, I find that little bit of flash of boiling steam will kind of take things over to the next level of cooked really quickly. I think that hot water just and steam just transfers the heat better. All right, take that out. Turn the heat off so I don't burn the hair off my arms accidentally, because nobody wants that. Oh, now we're doing the eggs. Got it. And then the noodles. So let's strain these noodles so they're ready to go. You know how you're always supposed to read all the way through the recipe and then make the recipe? I don't always end up doing that. Sometimes I'm just kind of flying by the seat of my pants. I am going to give these a quick rinse. Just in case they've released a lot of starch while they were soaking. And I'm using hot water here. All right, so there's our noodles. Whew. Good screaming hot pan. A little bit more oil. Isn't that pretty? I'm gonna try not to stir these too much because I don't want to lose that oil layer that's making this essentially non-stick and have a ton of stuck egg in here. So I'm trying to go really light. That's about perfect. All right. Now we're adding noodles. Breaking up that egg. I'm guessing the sauce goes in pretty quickly here, so let me check that. Sweet soy sauce, toss well. So what they're aiming for here is a little bit of browning on those noodles, so they want some texture. I'm going to try to spread them out just a little bit and let them get a little bit of texture in there. It says to let it sit for a minute. Oh yeah, look at that. See? We're getting a little bit of color. That's what we're looking for. I'm just going to try to flip that over so that I get some of that on the other side. Because these are not the long skinny noodles or the wider noodles, these are definitely cooking quickly. I can feel that they are a little soft. So we're not gonna spend a lot of time in this pan. All right, so we're adding back in our broccoli, our little bit of chicken, and any juices that have accumulated. And I'm just gonna break those up a bit because I think it's gonna be a mess otherwise. I kind of have one giant noodle wad, and I'm also gonna switch over to some tongs. So that I can kind of get those noodles a little bit more separated out. I need to get some silicone mats or some silicone gloves. You can see the scorch mark from doing this. That edge gets pretty hot. All right. That actually looks pretty done. Part of the thing with like late night post-drinking foods is they're usually not terribly pretty, and this is probably a good example of that. This is not a real looker, but I'm sure it's gonna taste awesome. Okay, now we're gonna add the sauce. Remember, this is our garlic, little rice wine vinegar, soy sauce, sugar. Trying to think of what else went in that. A lot of soy in this. And just toss to coat. And that's it. Drunken noodles. Feel like I should have a beer. Got some nice color on those noodles. I'm gonna kill the heat here. Yeah, that looks great. There you go. Pad see ew. Making sure I'm saying it right. Pad see ew. Drunken noodles. Really quick. Super fun. Really good weeknight dinner and a great use of a lot of broccoli.